Askreddit by Broadway 96. What's a company secret you can share now that you don't work there? Health insurance dude. When you file a claim, it is often denied because they're counting on you not escalating it. Once you do, your case goes to a medical management group which ought to be called the We Don't Wanna Pay group. Keep escalating and involve your doctor. Fight for the insurance you paid for. Can confirm busted my knee. Was on crutches BC I couldn't walk on it was denied BC they felt I wasn't in enough pain BC I didn't require a painkiller prescription DR went back and forth and I was on crutches 2 months before they finally relented and I could get my surgery. Mortgage industry here, we're like cops, only answer the question asked, do not provide additional information to be helpful, it could screw you over. I worked at L'Oreal. The cosmetics from L'Oreal and Lancome are practically the same. But Lancome costs like $20 more. Oprah Winfrey had us edit our models in post-production. I used to work in college admissions. Rich donors, athletes, and other VIPs have lower admission criteria. They still have minimums, but they're super easy to reach, even for a selective university. In the case of the university I work for, BYU, children of general church authorities also got this. I worked at a comic book store that offered a service where you paid a small premium to have sent in rare comics to have them graded at CGC. A few months later we had many customers coming in to check the status of their comics. We contacted the owner to see what was going on, and he would always claim that there was some distribution problem. Fast forward a few months. We found out he was taking customers' graded copies and selling them online while trying to return back issue versions of their original comics. How did this dude think that comic collectors who were sending in comics to be graded wouldn't recognize they weren't receiving their original comic back? Lol. I'm sure if you knew to the hobby wouldn't be the wiser, but man. I worked for a major hotel chain in housekeeping for over 10 years. The number of suicides and people who die naturally in their rooms is a lot higher than you'd think. I worked at a huge convention hotel with over 1,000 rooms and it happened quite often. Unless it was a pretty gnarly mess it would just get cleaned like normal and the next guest had no idea. At one of the hotels I worked at, a woman killed herself by drinking antifreeze. Her body was blue, blood, vomit, and damp, poop everywhere. My friend who was maintenance saw it and damp, couldn't sleep that night. Working at hotels will change you. Dart Sprite and Sprite Zero were the exact same thing. They didn't change the recipe one bit. They just changed the name and design. I've always assumed this, but it's nice to get confirmation. 1 gallon of milk, 1 full bottle of Monin vanilla syrup and 0.6 of a pound of espresso brewed. Now freeze it. Boom. Joe Muggs frozen cappuccino. I read that as 1 full bottle of Martrin and was very concerned. If you pick up a wall phone at Home Depot and push 7 it activates the store-wide intercom. This works in every store in my province of fake. Pound symbol then 35 at Lowe's. I worked at Olive Garden in the mid-90s while I was in college. Back then, they had the all-you-can-eat soup, salad and breadsticks lunch special for like $4.25 plus tax. Working lunch shift sucked. You would get probably 2 or 3 tables, and there was a 99% chance that all of your tables were to ladies getting this lunch special with water during their lunch break. After about a year, several of our best servers were mysteriously fired. It turns out, they were running a scam where they used the same receipt over and over again when these ladies paid for their meal with cash. Since we could get those 3 items ourselves from the back without bringing them into the system, these servers were just pocketing the cash for the entire meal. So instead of making like $5 $8 in tips during a lunch shift like the rest of us dumb schmucks, they would make an extra $20 or so by stealing from the company. At a local deli grocery store I worked at, everyone raved about how good their mac and cheese is, and it always sold really quick when I worked in the deli. It's even labeled on the menu as store's famous mac and cheese. It's literally just stuffers. We didn't even add anything to it. 1. Ford parts from Mexico are way more reliable than Ford parts from Detroit, or at least they were before 2020. I worked in Detroit and we had some customers who were fussy about us always doing repairs with Michigan parts, but when we had a problem that wouldn't stay fixed we would always secretly switch to the Mexican parts, which did solve things. 2. I was a prison guard a decade ago and we installed some facial tracking software in the surveillance cameras. One of the inmates panicked while cleaning the unused solitary confinement cells, which is usually a desirable job. It's easy as fuck and nobody pays attention to you, and he insisted that he be moved out of that job because there was a ghost. The ranking officers decided to check the new cameras, and the security software claimed it saw a face behind the inmate at the same time as he was visibly startled in the camera footage. We're all aware there are mundane reasons why a new facial recognition system would think it saw a ghost, but since the inmate and the security software both thought there was a ghost, it was decided that the inmate should be immediately transferred at no penalty. Damn, it would suck being the one who ended up in solitary confinement in that cell, lol. T-Mobile has two coverage maps. The one they show customers and the real one that is internal shows the actual coverage. Diminishes by about 50%. Their coverage is built on a bed of lies. I'll say it. A place similar in name to Past Face Urgent Care, at least in the region I worked at, banned their front desk from informing customers that they have a credit balance to use toward their services and still required us to charge customers the full price on top of what we already owed them. Some accounts had like $500 of copay that should have been refunded but weren't. I was actually reprimanded for applying the credit balance, because despite finance agreeing my method was correct, the regional manager said it was not a good look for the company and hindered her profits. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't even understand what you're saying here and how they could be owed copay. I worked for a DR's office that owed thousands of dollars to patients. After I gathered all the info on what was owed, I was laid off. I'm talking a week after I finished the audits. I wonder if any of them were paid. Worked at a American Toyota dealership in the body shop for 12 years. We would throw away literally everything regardless of the environmental impact. Car paint, which is nasty shit BTW, went straight to the dumpster. Radiator fluid, down the drain. I even saw someone put oil down the drain a couple times even though we had barrels for it up in the service department. The only thing we saved was old car parts which the boss then sold to scrap yards and pocketed the money. The painter didn't ever wear a mask either. He is around 60 and still kicking despite 30 years of painting without a mask somehow. I worked at General Motors in the paint department for a while before moving to final repair. I found it that guys that wanted to commit suicide but wanted to take care of their family's future would volunteer to work in the clear coat booth. They would be seen in there with no mask on. The stuff would crystallize on their lungs. No way to save you after that. Usually took a year. I worked for a restoration company. One time an elderly woman called them to clean her house. She was a hoarder or there had been a fire. I can't remember. Anyway, the company charged $57,000 for the work to be done. But in actuality they couldn't even get the charges to add up to $20K. She couldn't file this on her insurance. There are other examples of gross overcharging, but this is the worst I know of that wasn't on the large loss side. The lesson here, if you have water, fire, mold, or hoarder damage and call in a company to clean it up, go through every line item on the invoice. Every single one. I had a mold remediation and I did go through every line item and made them explain to me the reasoning of their charges. It ended up knocking off around $3,000. In a broadband company I worked for, I was tasked with editing thousands of complaints to avoid huge Ofcom fines. That sure sounds criminal. I still work here, but everyone please get a copy of your medical records from every place you've been to. Keep the hard copy in your home. Because I have horror stories from working in medical records since 2007. Working in a field that involves medical records, I totally agree. The number of times I've seen false diagnoses, other people's information mixed in, and assorted other crazy stuff is too high. Olive Garden breadsticks are just France brand breadsticks, garlic salt, and butter. Eater, it's margarine, not butter. I forgot there is a difference. Yeah, but I'm not buying France sticks when Olive Garden will give me an unlimited amount that are already prepared. Worked at Best Buy 20 years ago. Employee discount was 5% over cost and I needed a new printer. Decided to splurge on the gold-plated USB printer cable that we sold for $40. Rang up $1.78. I worked there in high school, early college, during break a bit. Definitely took advantage of accessory pricing. Other thing that was nice was the Intel and AMD employee offers where you get bus and motherboards for probably 50% off or better. There was a similar program for some car audio stuff too. Probably close to 75% off head units, subwoofers, amplifiers, etc. I bought probably $2,000 worth for like $500 and sold it for $1,000. I was the one who did an undercover news stories about Scamp's pet stores and their affiliation with puppy mills. Please don't buy from pet stores, folks. It baffles me that in the US, they sell puppies in pet stores. Here they only sell fish and rodents like rats, which is still horrible when you see how 20 goldfish are stuffed in a way too small tank. I used to work as a receptionist at an upscale salon. While I was there, the salon introduced a new line of products marketed towards men. Up until that point most of our products were marketed towards women, but the execs saw that we were getting more male customers. Every item in the men's product line was about half the cost of our other products. The men's shampoo was the exact same shampoo the salon had been selling for years, but because they put it in black packaging with the word man on it, it was half the price. The owner's explanation was, well, men don't want to pay that much for hair products. For the rest of the time I worked there, every time a woman came up to buy that shampoo I'd tell her that the men's shampoo was the exact same product for half the price. Which the exec was happy about, because he saw good sales for the male shampoo he introduced. I used to work surveillance at a casino. From something like 3 stories high ceiling, we could zoom in on money on the table games and read the serial numbers of the bills. We could see the pips on the dice. Policy was to not look down blouses. This is true and also very annoying because I work on the floor and the guys in surveillance can't be bothered to